Good afternoon, everyone. Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Unshakeable Presence in Turbulent Times. My name is Habib, Bako, Director of Community Building at Independent Sector. I will be facilitating the discussion to ensure that we stay on time and get to your questions. For those of you who are joining this webinar for the first time or joining IS, we say welcome. Independent Sector is a national membership organization representing a diverse set of nonprofits, foundations, and corporate giving programs working to ensure that everyone in the United States thrives. We ask that you join us in two ways. You can visit independentsector.org/membership to consider joining us as a member if you're not one already. We also ask that you visit independentsector.org/COVID-19 to learn, engage, action. We've curated a list of resources and articles that we hope you'll find helpful. Joining me for the next hour is Swami Jaya Devi, spiritual founder and director of Kashi Atlanta, for an interactive conversation about how you respond to this trauma in this worldwide pandemic for the people you serve, but especially for yourself and your loved ones. We are living through trying times and experiencing extraordinary levels of stress, anxiety, uncertainty, and fear. Swami is going to guide us through a couple of exercises, answer your questions, and offer tools to guide you through these uncertain times. As part of the webinar feature, all lines are currently muted. We will be using the polling function during the webinar to generate questions for Swami. We'll also monitor the Q&A box for additional questions. Please submit your questions in the Q&A box. This webinar will be recorded and posted on the Independent Sector website and emailed to you within 24 hours. Please make sure you take the survey at the end to ensure that we capture all your insights and questions. With that, I want to turn you over to Swami, who has done incredible work in helping communities, leaders, and change makers develop a conscious, meaningful response to this crisis. This is even more important in the midst of COVID-19. Over to you, Swami.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm honored to be present here with you all today. You know, very much like all of you, I'm the leader of a nonprofit organization. We do a lot of community service work. You know, we're still figuring out how to do our street relief and continuing to do so through this crisis. So I'm just really, really happy to get to connect with all of you and hopefully share some tools that I have learned over many years of service that might help you through this time, because you know, we're living in a wildly unprecedented time for ourselves. And the people that I've spoken with and connected with, the common thread has been that we are all experiencing extraordinary levels of stress and anxiety and uncertainty and even fear, you know. And so I think figuring out how to respond to the trauma of a worldwide pandemic for yourself, for your organization, and for the people that you serve, and for your loved ones, right? It's like this multi-dimensional response to figure out how to bring presence and effective work to the moment that you're living in. And so one of the teachings that I often like to do at times like this is I started by putting this myself in this. I say, how do I stand at the eye of this storm so that I don't get caught in the storm? You know, how do I get myself to stay centered enough and present enough to be effective in the midst of the wildness of this storm? And this pandemic is stretching this teaching. It's a teaching that I've been living for many years, and I started out as a teacher of contemplative practice at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic. So this is not my first epidemic to try to walk through mindfully, but it's different. And I think figuring out how to stand in the space that we're all living in, and especially right now, you know, we've been in it for a minute now. At the beginning, it was like, okay, you know, kind of respond and shelter in place and do all of the practices that make the most sense, that kind of scientifically and medically make the most sense. And now I think there's an almost increased level of uncertainty because the messages are less clear. The messages from our government, from even, it could even be from your bosses or your organization, even the messages from the people that you serve. It's like, you know, people have to go back to work or have been working throughout this whole crisis and, you know, need tools to figure out how to develop and maintain resiliency, how to, you know, again, respond rather than react, how to be a warrior of social change, which I believe you all are, and stay really fully present during a global upheaval. That's a big storm to negotiate. And so one of the questions that Habib and I started with was, can the tools of mindfulness actually help you here? Right? Is meditation, is, you know, developing deep presence, is deep listening, are all these tools actually effective in something like this? And as from where I'm standing, they are. So you're going to put it to the test with me a little bit today, and we'll see if something starts to work for you. Because I think, you know, I think that unprecedented times, which we're definitely living in, can create unprecedented possibility. And part of that, I believe, is the willingness to stand in a space of uncertainty. And to, at this point, I think to stand in it for a moment in time that's almost unbearable. It's a little longer than any of us have wanted this to be. You know, in an ideal world, we'd be coming to the end of the shelter in place, and that is unclear. And so we've got an added layer of uncertainty to try to negotiate and keep ourselves and our loved ones and our constituent, you know, the people that you're working for, you know, held in a space of real safety and well-being. So I think that some of the tools that we're going to share today, that I'll share today and talk about today, can help you figure out how to create meaning in the midst of crisis. That's one of the things that they've done for me, is how to kind of winnow out the deeper response in yourself rather than staying in a space of reactivity. So I'm actually going to ask you to do a mini practice with me as we start. It's something that I think can help you settle into the space and kind of connect to the content of the webinar a little more effectively. Okay, so hopefully everybody's up for it. So it's just a really simple practice. You don't have to be a practice meditator. You don't have to even understand what mindfulness means. All you have to do is be able to breathe and be aware at the same time. Those two things all of us can do. Okay, that's kind of the most simple foundation of mindfulness practices. Okay, so with your eyes open, take a deeper breath in. And through your mouth, like a sigh, exhale. 2 more. Inhale deeply. And as if you could let something go, exhale. And do 1 more like that. Inhale deeply. And a little deeper letting go, exhale. And now we're going to close your eyes and do 3 more, just 3, okay? Inhale deeply. And this time with your mouth closed, right? Just like it's a more regular exhale. Just exhale deeply and see if you can let go of the surface layer of tension. Whatever you're holding tightest or that's making you feel uncomfortable. Inhale again. And exhale, just see if you can let go, just 1 layer deeper. And do one more conscious breath. Big, deep breath in. Hold the breath for just a moment as if you were gathering up all the things you'd like to let go of and let them ride out of you on the exhalation. Just let your breath go out. And just sit with your eyes closed now for 3 breaths. Right? So it's 3 open eye breaths, 3 closed eye breaths, and 3 regular breaths. Just noticing and observing how you are and what you're bringing into the webinar today. What's got you, where you're standing. Are you out in the storm getting hit with all the hail and the rain and the thunderclouds? Or are you standing in a space, you know, kind of a more centered space within yourself? And without judging any of that, just observing and noticing. Just pay attention to how you are. And then come back to me. Open your eyes again. Okay. Hopefully a little bit better. Hopefully it's a little bit better. You start to go, oh yeah, that did something. And I like you to observe whether or not that did something for you. Because when you start to notice and give yourself feedback, oh yeah, just in, you know, that took a minute and a half, right? That just in a minute and a half, I can change something. I can change how I'm standing in this. So I want to talk a little bit more about uncertainty because I feel like it is a prevalent experience of this time. And that right now, the moment that we're living in, we're being met with an added layer of uncertainty. And one of the things, you know, the human spirit is incredibly resilient. We are incredibly resilient people. But there starts to become a feeling of underlying trauma when you stay in uncertainty for too long. And so one of the things that the teachings around mindfulness and experiencing trauma, you know, tells us that all the experiences that we have, that in our minds and in our emotional body and in ourselves, that we would consider traumatic or incredibly stressful, that we have to learn how to address and process those things more fully, so that we can release them and heal them, because otherwise it starts to erode our resiliency. And I think that's one of the things we're seeing right now is that I read a paper this morning about how people would rate the amount of stress and anxiety that they're experiencing right now. And it compared it to about 4 weeks ago, and it's actually increased now. Right, it hasn't, with the people, with the, you know, different states opening up and stuff. The level of uncertainty and stress and anxiety has increased. It's up in the 60, 70 percentile. That people feel like it's continuing to go up. So when we talk about how, I think one of the things that mindfulness can start to teach you is how to change your relationship with uncertainty. And one of the things that I think that does is it shifts your ability to be proactive and present and intentional about how you respond to the different situations and conflicts. And, you know, because when your equanimity starts to be eroded, your resiliency gets eroded along with it. And when your resiliency is down, your reactivity goes up. Okay, so when your reactivity goes up, you're less patient, your kindness starts to get a little less, your compassion, you know, all the things that we rely on ourselves that we hopefully are pretty good at. So it can start to take a minute to develop a more conscious response to your boss or to your wife or to your husband or to your kids. Or to your coworkers or to the people that you're serving. And I think that is a common human experience right now. And so if we think about changing your relationship with uncertainty, I think one of the hardest things and most helpful things, and I apologize that they are the same thing, because it is one of the hardest, but it also is one of the most helpful, is the acceptance of the experience that you're living in. I think when we want it to change faster than it's changing, we get frustrated and impatient, and it increases our reactivity. And so there's a teaching about I know versus I wonder, that if we can stand in a space of I wonder has more uncertainty in it, right? I wonder what's going to unfold from this is very different than I know what needs to happen and I know what needs to be done. And I'm not saying you don't know, you might be the solution. And if you are, then I hope you're sharing it. But it's like getting comfortable with uncertainties. It puts you in the space of, I don't know. I don't totally know the answer to, I don't totally know where my organization is going. I don't totally know the answer to what the best choices are, but I can make the best choices I can if I'm standing at the eye of the storm, if I'm standing in a space of resiliency, where you start to have an acceptance of your own reactivity. You start to have an acceptance of other people's reactivity. You know, you start to just say, okay, if I stand in this kind of open space of acceptance, I'm not jumping in trying to fix it. I'm not trying to fear it and push it away. I'm opening to the experience that I'm living in. And it gives you a kind of a permission. I'm going to talk to Habib again, right? Habib and I talked about permission, that it's okay to feel what you feel, right? That part of acceptance and openness in uncertainty is, you know, whatever your response is at this point to this crisis is okay. Right? It's like you kind of alleviate self-judgment from the equation. You go, oh yeah, I'm angry. I'm mad about how this is being handled or what my boss is asking of me. It's okay to feel it. It's actually essential to allow yourself, to give yourself permission to feel it. And to create that field of open curiosity instead of, you know, I know what needs to be done and this is what needs to happen. And, you know, that kind of narrows our scope. And so that I think that permission, that openness, while we're in this crazy, you know, crucible of change, we're in this intense moment of change and crisis, that we want to learn how to give ourselves permission to feel what we feel and create a sense of openness. So Habib, what do you think about that? Do you have anything, you know, you
No,
and I had a great conversation about.
we've had a lot of conversations, and thank you, Swami, for the earlier teaching. I definitely felt a shift, and I'm assuming that a lot of people on this call have felt that shift as well. And I'm just grounding us in earnest and honest conversation. My question to you, Swami, is you're on the front lines in Atlanta right now, and with everything that's happening in Georgia, and the services you've been providing in feeding the homeless for over 20 years. How do you balance that uncertainty and fear? Can you speak about that while being centering in the eye of the storm?
Yeah, I think that's the dance, actually. I think that's the dance of conscious leadership and the dance of kind of mindful presence, is to say, it's not that you're going to control the storm or change the storm. The storms of life, you know, we experience lots of different storms. We experience personal storms or health storms or family storms. We experience work storms. And right now we're experiencing a storm that's unprecedented in our lifetime. I mean, I was talking to my 93-year-old mom, and she was equating it to her experiences during World War II. For most of us, we weren't around then, and so we didn't quite have that experience. But yeah, I think the balance is a big part of the equation. And part of creating balance is mindful aware. It's like when, you know, I'm a meditator, I'm a Swami, I'm a monk. So I meditate every single day. And I'm a big proponent of doing practices like that for yourself as part of your toolkit of self-care, because meditation is about your relationship with your higher power, with whatever sacred source you believe in, but it's also about your relationship with yourself and with your own mind. You know, if I could quote the Buddha, I'm not even a Buddhist, Swami, but if I could quote the Buddha, said at one point, the greatest enemy that you'll ever have in your life, you know, if you took all the haters, everybody that doesn't like you, that tries to trip you up, right? Even if it's not personal, all the negative experiences you'll have, if you took all of them and put them into one person, they won't hold a match to the amount of pain that you'll experience if you don't ever train your own mind. And so he would say an untrained mind is your greatest enemy, but a trained mind has equal power in being your greatest ally, because it's your reactivity without the balance and the, you know, I call it the drink as you pour teachings, the ability to drink in the silence and maintain equanimity, so that when you go out on the streets or you go to your family or whoever you're dealing with, when you really start to serve and to do the work, your cup is full, right? You have to fill up your cup every day. And all of us have to figure out different ways to do that. But the balance between, like, I think it's easier to get off balance if you don't do intentional practices to maintain it. And I actually think that one of the reasons to do daily practice and to kind of cultivate habits that keep your resiliency strong is so that when the storm gets bigger, I was going to curse for a second, but I shouldn't use those words. When the storm, right? You know what I was going to say, right? When it hits the fan, right? When the storm gets really intense and hard, which is what it's doing right now, you have this reservoir of resiliency to draw upon, to go out and say, okay, you know, I know it's really difficult, really challenging right now. And like I said, I think people are wearing more thin now than even at the beginning. And so if there are some silver linings in, you know, utilizing practices that keep your resiliency stronger, if that's one of the silver linings that could come out of this, you know, maybe some of the tools in the Changemakers Toolkit or some of the practices that you guys already know and do, maybe you'll turn your focus towards them and say, you know, I've been so busy and so overwhelmed, I haven't been taking care of myself enough. Maybe I can shift that.
And Swami, thanks. I think one of the things that we talked about, and I used to myself in this conversation, was around paralysis. You know, that when things are hitting us from different angles, how do we, if you were starting this journey in mindfulness, how do you break out of this paralysis that usually then layers up? Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah. And like I said to you the other day, you know, sometimes when it gets really intense like this, I'll go to some of the scientific research, because it can help people go, oh, if there's scientific research behind meditation and behind mindfulness practices, then maybe I'll try it. It's been proven. And hopefully we're relying on a lot of science things right now. And so I've gone to some of the, you know, looking up some of the latest research around science and mindfulness practices. And there are a couple breath practices that they've done studies with recently, where you'll notice one of the focuses in the mini practice that we just did was breathing, right? It's the foundation. Breath awareness is the foundation of mindful awareness. And one of the reasons I'm such a proponent of it is because I think anybody can learn how to do deep breaths. It's a tool we always have with us. It costs nothing. You can teach it to anybody. And stress changes our breathing patterns, right? When we're really stressed out, we do what's called clavicular breathing. We breathe up here. When we're deep and calm, we take deep, calm breaths. We even go, you know, when we're satisfied and happy, we do that sigh of contentment. And so learning some of the breath practices are one of the ways that you unfreeze yourself. So the freeze response is actually part of the amygdala response. Your amygdala is part of your primitive brain. And there are 3 different responses that have been studied that everybody experiences when we get fearful, right? Think about what everybody's experiencing now: fear, stress, anxiety, and uncertainty. Those are the things that launch us into amygdala brain. Okay. You know, open-heartedness, love, calmness, equanimity, those are the things that take us back out of it. But one of the things that these studies have shown is that it's very difficult to think your way out of paralysis. Right? It's very easy to breathe your way out of it. Okay, so Einstein said Einstein said you cannot solve the problem on the same level of consciousness that created it. It's a different way of saying you can't just change your mind with your mind. You can't just say, stop being afraid. Right? It doesn't work that way. The fear mind just goes, yeah, well, I don't care what you say. I'm scared. I'm still afraid, or I'm angry. And so you have to use a different tool. You have to do it on a different level of consciousness than where the problem is being created. And so this is one of the ways where there's a couple breaths that, again, we have on our, you know, we're giving them out like crazy. We have on our site that you guys will see the slide for. But the 2 breath practices that I want you to know is there's a breath called the victory breath and the infinity breath. Those 2 breaths have been scientifically proven to switch you out of amygdala thinking, out of fight, flight, or fear, which is, fight, flight, and fear. Yeah, because you run, right? So it switches you out of that kind of thinking into that rest and digest brain, where your body can rest again. You start to digest your food well, you know, no lions are chasing you now, which, you know, stress and anxiety and anger and all those things are modern day lions chasing us. That's how our brain reacts to it, that amygdala brain. And so when you start to do deep practice, you can pretty immediately feel yourself shift out of that panic mode or frozen mode. And we've developed different like English mantras to use depending on, do you go to fight? Do you get angry and you want to lash out? Because, you know, when we're in our amygdala mind, that's when we cause harm. And we cause harm to ourselves or to our loved ones or in our environment. And we don't really want to, but we're just stuck in that thinking pattern. And so if you go to the fight mode, the mantra that we kind of developed is, I refuse to be enemies with you. You know, we started to say, okay, if you dismantle the fight response by saying, I'm not going to be enemies with the person that I'm feeling threatened by. If you get into the flight mode, it's, you know, I refuse to run from the situation. I'm not going to run away from it. I'm going to, you know, be the spiritual warrior. I'm going to soften and open and stay present to the best of my ability. And then the freeze mode is actually both of those. It's kind of, it can be based in fight or flight. It can be you freeze because you're so mad or so outraged, or what was the word I was using with another guy that was really reactive the other day. Anyway, some kind of righteous indignation. That's it, right? Where it was like, I'm just in righteous indignation. I can't stop myself. I'm so mad. And so when you're in that, or you're also in, you know, freeze kind of gets you, either you're in fight or you're in flight. You want to freeze up because you're afraid you're going to hurt someone. And yourself included, because, you know, in freeze and in flight, we throttle our voice. in fight, or sometimes, you know, we use our voice and we do harm. So we don't want to do harm externally, but we also don't want to do harm internally. We don't want to combust, you know, we don't want to hold ourselves so tight that we're ready to blow at any moment, or that we blow when we get home with our families. And so developing skills in this to be able to go, okay, if I can breathe for a few minutes and switch my brain away from that panicked reaction, it actually starts to change your relationship with power, which is another thing that I think is vital for us right now. Because when you're in a situation like this, often we feel really powerless, right?
Absolutely. And sorry for those. Apparently my audio was going in and out with the
Yeah.
headset. So again, back to flight freeze and stress. And appreciate it, Swami, for keeping me grounded and not panicking during this moment. So I apologize for anyone that didn't hear me in the beginning. But I think we will segue to the polling. And I hope, Chris in the back end, thank you very much for sending out the polls. We hope you can respond, and we will do it for 60 seconds. And then the first question is, what are the leading stresses for you during this period? And you have multiple choices. And the second question is, during this time of the pandemic, how has your resiliency changed? So we have 60 seconds, and then I'll turn the top answers to Swami to dive in and provide insights. And also use the Q&A for additional questions. Swami, there's a question that came in around while we're waiting for the results. What is the mantra for combating freezing?
Oh, okay. So it's I refuse to be enemies with you is the fight response. I refuse to, what did I say the second one? I refuse to run from the situation, right? I refuse to run away. I refuse to run from the situation or from myself. So the freeze response is I refuse to give away my power. Because that's what's happening when you freeze. It's like your relationship, and that's where I started to go. Your relationship with power is what's on the plate, on the table right there. It's like, if I act from what I feel, I'm gonna lash out and hurt you. Or if it's so unbearable what I'm feeling, I just want to run from the situation. So you go possum on it, right? I'm in Georgia. We have possums, right? You go possum. You just go, I just am going to freeze. I can only barely tolerate being in my own experience. And so it's learning how to befriend your emotions and your feelings, learning to create that open field of acceptance and say, okay, this is how I feel. I don't like it, but I can accept it. I can accept this is what I'm feeling. Habib the other day said, every time I try to do a mindfulness practice, Habib, I'm outing you. He says, I'm angry. I'm so angry. And I said, good. You should be angry. You should be angry. But how do you use the anger not to hurt yourself or hurt anybody else, but as part of the fuel for your passion and your purpose? And then you're okay. That anger is rocket fuel. It's a secret superpower.
Absolutely, Swami. And it's okay to out me because the pollings are in line with my sentiments when we talked. The sort of leading stresses based on the polls is anxiety over the uncertainty of the situation, as well as people just burn out with work. And the second question around the resiliency is people feel less resilient during this time. So just to summarize, there's the burnout coupled with the uncertainty about the future, and then there is people really feel less resilient during this pandemic. Can you provide some guidance on how we should deal with both that burnout as well as the fear and anxiety about what's to happen, and while being less resilient in the present?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Okay, because one of the ways that I want us to address the anxiety, right? Like I said before, stress and anxiety alter your breathing patterns. When we're scared, we even have sayings. I can't catch my breath, right? I can't take it in. Like I can't breathe it into my being. It's so painful to feel what I'm feeling. And so when you start to do deep breathing practices, you change. It's like you sneak into your mind. You kind of do a hack, right? You sneak in and you go, okay, I'm not going to try to change my mind right now. I'm just going to try to change my breathing patterns. And so you learn these deep breaths, and I want us to do practice together, because I think, bang, right? You've changed something, right? So, and I want you to leave this with a tool to change something. And then that also, when you do daily practices like this, and, you know, a lot of our people, we have, we'll set things on our phone. So 4 times during every day that you're working, every work day, 4 times during your workday, I want you to set a little ping to go off on your phone. And it's supposed to be your reminder to say, it's like, I want a little Swami to pop up in your phone that says, right now, do 5 deep breaths, right? Just right now, do a practice that fills you up with that sense of well-being for just a minute. And you can do 10 minutes or 20 minutes, but you don't have to. You just have to start doing something. And so those are the kind of things that start to affect, in a positive way, your resiliency. And it's not that mindfulness practices are the only thing that affect your resiliency. You know, hanging out and laughing with your kids, or going on a run, or doing a yoga class online, a little plug for yoga, right? Any of those kind of things can help your resiliency. They're designed, they're all things that help fill your cup. So it's not that the mindful practices are the only thing, but they're power tools. They're power tools. They've been proven to work. And there's something that you have with you anywhere you are. You might be in a work situation where, you can't pick up your 3-year-old and chew on their chubby cheeks to make you go, okay, I'm going to be okay. So you just go, okay, what is something that I have with me 24/7 that is super accessible, super easy to do, and powerfully effective? And so Habib's going to tell me if now is a moment when I could lead you through a practice, or if we want to answer a couple more questions or.
Swami, I think you can lead us to another practice, and then we'll go to the next polling series.
Okay. So this is one that it can be a little bit like this. And it's intentional to be a little bit like this, okay? So you're going to have to really pay attention, and that's on purpose, so that your mind can't just wander off and start, getting caught in fear again. Okay, so there's a pattern to this breath, and it's going to be through your nose some of the time and through your mouth some of the time. So I'm going to lead you through it, and it is on our website. You can follow it there if you don't get it totally this time, okay? Okay, so everybody exhale. Now inhale long and deep through your nose. And almost like you're blowing out a candle, pucker your lips and exhale through your mouth like. Keep your mouth like that and inhale through your mouth. Close your lips, exhale through your nose. And that's the pattern. Inhale through your nose. Blow all your stress out. Inhale through your mouth. Exhale through your nose. And you're going to continue like that. Inhale through your nose. Blowing all the stress. Exhale. Inhale through your mouth. Exhale through your nose. So you're going to keep breathing like that. I'm going to do it with you one more time. Inhale through your nose. Blowing, exhale. Inhale through your mouth. And exhale through your nose. So I'm going to ask you to keep doing that breath for just a moment while I give you a little more information about that breath. So you're still going in through your nose, out through your mouth. It's kind of a C shape, in through your mouth, out through your nose. Okay, so this is one of the breaths that it's been scientifically proven. It's going to shift your way of thinking if you're caught in stress, anxiety, fear, insecurity, uncertainty, anger. It's going to shift you away from that pattern of thinking into rest and digest, where your body can calm down again, your adrenal glands stop firing, right? Your whole physical self starts to go, oh, I'm actually safe. This is okay. My breath is deep and slow. My heart rate starts to go down again. I feel a sense of well-being. I'm creating it from the inside out, right? I'm standing at the eye of the storm. I'm okay, right? I'm okay. Because it's when we feel threatened that our mind jumps into amygdala thinking, right? When, we think that our reality is threatened, or our well-being, our people, all those things get threatened. We get caught in that deep uncertainty, and we're on shaky ground. So you're still doing the breath. You're inhaling deeply through your nose, blowing out. You're exhaling through your mouth. Inhaling through your mouth and exhale through your nose. You're going to do it for 2 more minutes, just 2 minutes. You can do anything for 2 minutes. You're an amazing being. You can do anything for 2 more minutes. But in this 2 minutes, I want you to stretch out the length of the breath just a teeny bit, just 1 or 2 beats. Go a little bit longer on your inhale and a little more complete on your exhale, right? A little bit bigger on your inhale, so it gets as big as you can breathe, and then a bigger release of tension or stress. You have to start to let things ride out on the breath. So it's an intentional practice of letting go. Okay. Okay, so wherever you are in the breath, take a deep breath in. Hold the breath for just a moment without holding your body tight. Let your body be kind of this soft container of the breath. And this time, to end the breath, just exhale as slowly as you can. It could be mouth or nose, doesn't matter. Just exhale, really draw out the exhalation. And now sit in a space of acceptance and observance, right? Just notice what's different. Take a deep breath in. If your eyes were closed, open your eyes as you exhale and come back to the conversation.
Thanks, Swami. Before we go to polling, there's a question that came in, and I'm assuming from a practitioner lens. With the crisis, every week is different. And the question is around if the practice that has been helpful in calming you, for example, using the yoga and the bath, what if that doesn't work the next week? And what is the next step in figuring out how do you keep up with the change and the anxiety that comes with the crisis and the new information or the misinformation? How do you use additional tools if the tool you currently have in your toolbox doesn't work?
Okay, so it's such a great question. And especially because one of the things that our fear mind tends to do is say, okay, this practice is working, but not for very long. And that's because our resiliency is lower. Our ability to do long practice or the same practice continuously has been reduced, I think, by about half, because our resiliency just isn't there. Our foundation of well-being is being eroded. And so you got to go, okay, so one of the things that I started to develop through this, and I'm not sure, Jadas, how we can get them. I know it's on our website and on my Instagram, but I developed these 14-day practices for the pandemic. And every 3 days, you get a new practice. There's a new practice that goes out every day, but your morning meditation practice changes every 3 days, because when your fear mind and when the information changes so fast, and your ability to be nimble and kind of, stay in the eye of the storm, and here comes another storm, and here comes another storm, right? Your skillful action, in martial arts we call it skillful action, to be able to roll with all the things that are coming. When that starts to get eroded, one of the kind of tricks is to change the practice you're doing every 3 days, is to be able to say, okay, because I have to be so nimble in my response to what's happening in the world, it's almost like our practices have to be really flexible and nimble as well. So if you've been doing something and then it stops working, change the practice. It's not actually the practice that's the problem. It's just that your mind has gotten used to it. It's like a familiar thing. And then your mind starts to say, yeah, that's not enough. I need more. And the not enoughness mind is another thing that we have to talk about at some point, because so much is being asked of us that it's like the whole world is in not enoughness. We're in this scarcity thinking, and then, scarcity thinking in the grocery stores and all those things. And so scarcity and scarcity thinking about our own resiliency is another way to address resiliency, to be able to sit when you meditate each morning and say, I am enough. What I bring to my work is enough. I am doing the best I can. That's another form of acceptance, is to accept what your response is to the conditions that we're living in. It's extraordinary. The demand on us is extraordinary. It's like we're being asked to shelter in place, and, some people have more time. Some people are working 3 times as hard. And so, you know what I mean? There's this polarity of experience happening in so many different ways and in different communities. I'd like to touch on that for just a moment as well, because there's this horrific polarization in communities that's happening right now. And it's one of the things Habib and I talked about, right? Where it's like, yeah, you should be mad, right? I think that the COVID is highlighting disparities in our community that already existed, but that this is it's like shining a spotlight. And when you shine a spotlight, you get stark contrast. You get lighter, you know what I mean? It's like you can really see it, and we can really see it now. And so as conscious change makers, we have to figure out how to let that response, that anger at injustice, rise up in us, because it is the right response. It's right to be angry at social injustice, but then how to use it mindfully, because otherwise you'll lash out from it and it becomes ineffective. Or you'll lash in with it and it becomes self-destructive, or you'll lash at your people, which just you start burning your own house down. You have to learn how to be skillful enough with that reaction to say, yes, it's okay to have your heart broken the way the world is right now. It is heartbreaking. But now what do I do with the heartbreak? What do I do with the grief? What do I do with the anger? And how do I craft it into a conscious response to this? How do I respond to this from the depth of who I am, not just from my reaction to it?
And Swami, just building on that, one of the things you said that stayed with me is how am I using that emotion as a change maker to drive positive change during the impact? So it's one of the things that keeps resonating is how do you channel that anger to then drive positive change? Which is a good segue to the next polling. Chris, you can put that up. So the first question is around how has your level of trust in institutions changed since the COVID-19 pandemic? And the second question is your level of fear during the pandemic. And this will be up for a minute. And while that is up, Swami, I will, there's a question that came up around victory and infinity breath. Mm-hmm. Specific to the last one we did, was that a victory breath or an infinity breath? And can you speak about the difference of both?
Yes. That was the infinity breath, which is, it's a little more powerful practice. It changes the pattern of your mind faster than the victory breath does. And that's one of the reasons I like to teach it when we're in a group and you can do it all together. But the victory breath is something you can do anywhere and nobody knows you're doing it, right? So it's like a sneak tool. That's why I'm like, no, I have to teach people both of these breaths. So that the one that we just practiced together was an infinity breath. And it's kind of named after this infinity of space. It's supposed to give you a feeling of spaciousness, like you have enough space and you have enough time and you're going to be okay. The victory breath is at this point, you'll probably have to go do, maybe we'll end with a couple breaths, but you'll probably have to go do it on the website. And that's, to me, the biggest difference is victory breath you can do anywhere, nobody knows you're doing it. Infinity breath, it's faster, more powerful, but a little more obvious.
So we have the results from the polling, and the question around trust is that 38% it's been the same and a little bit somewhat decreased. And around the question around fear is the fear level is increased by 44%. So that is unanimously, well, not unanimously, but that is increasingly, the fear is increased during this crisis. So can you talk about the fact that there hasn't been that much change in the trust in institutions, but there's an increase in fear.
Okay.
Balance.
I actually think it's a good sign that your trust in institutions has stayed pretty much the same, that you see some good coming out of institutions, right? You see, as change makers, as people that believe in the good, you see that our institutions are trying to do some good. So I actually think that's a really positive sign and should be applauded in all of us. To see the cup half full in some ways is really good. But then having your fear level increase, I think that it takes us to your relationship with fear and with your own fear mind. And that quote from the Buddha, that ability to say, how do I relate to my fear? And when I get afraid, does my fear kind of take over the whole arena of my mind? And I want to do a couple things with this, right? Because I feel like when you're afraid, it takes work to respond consciously. It's a little bit of an easier reaction to respond badly when you're afraid, right? It's like, okay, I'm caught in my fear mind. I'm overrun with anxiety. And so I'm going to use it as a reason to behave badly. And I don't think because everybody else is behaving badly, I never think it's a good idea. So one of my questions, I guess, to give back a question to you is, can you be afraid? Can you experience fear and be a powerful and an effective leader at the same time? I actually think that is one of the definitions of courage. I don't think you can be fearless without experiencing fear. I don't think you can be courageous without experiencing, you know, fear and vulnerability. That the most courageous things you do are at the times when you're shaken in your shoes. I think that's one of the definitions of courage. I think it says, you know, how do I bring powerful presence into uncertainty? And if I don't practice powerful presence every day, it's much, much more difficult. And that's one of the things that a mindfulness practice is designed to give you, is that ability to get back to the eye of the storm, to stay connected to the sacred source of whatever tradition you believe in, or even if you don't believe in a tradition, you still believe in the good because you're a change maker. So you breathe in kindness, you breathe in love, you breathe in whatever you believe in until your cup is full, so that when you go out into the world, you can be scared, but your connection to the good, your connection to your deeper purpose, is prevalent, right? It fills and informs the work that you're doing, so that you can say, yeah, it is crazy, scary times. I don't know the solution to everything, but I don't expect myself to. I expect myself to show up and bring integrity and presence and compassion and kindness, and I'll bring it out on the streets. I'll bring it to my coworkers. I'll bring it to my family the best as I can, because, you know, I'm going to keep drinking as I pour. And I think that can really help your resiliency. And one other thing I want to say about the fear and the fear mind is to watch out for inflammatory language. Inflammatory thinking tends to lead to inflammatory language. Inflammatory language tends to lead to inflammatory action. And early on in the COVID crisis, I found it in myself. All of a sudden, I was like, wait a second, that was a very dramatic statement that you just made, Swami. You know, that was very dramatic. And I was like, I want to be mindful of that. I want to watch how I'm languaging, because am I using my language to inflame more fear for myself or for the other people in the room? So I just think how it changes our relationship with fear, because it changes our relationship with stress, is how we speak about what we're experiencing. And I'm not saying don't say what you experience, but pay attention to it.
Yeah, I want to give a chance to share the slide of where people can connect with you, because there've been a lot of questions around resources, and then we can then switch to I know you wanted to do a closing breathing exercise, and well, before we do that, so people leave on a grounded, calm note, I just want to thank everyone for joining us. You can connect with us at independentsector.org/COVID-19. This recording and slide deck will be posted, as well as links to Kashi Atlanta and Swami Jaya Devi. Please visit the Changemakers Toolkit, as well as her Instagram page. There's a lot of tools there that help us do the work that we do. So I would turn it off to Swami to close us out. Swami, thank you so much. And you know, we can talk for hours and hours. I appreciate as always for guiding us through this time. So appreciate you. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so let's end with we'll just do a couple breaths together again, but this will be the victory breath. And the victory is the victory over the negative mind, over the fear mind. So it's a breath. It's called Ujjayi breath for anybody that's a yoga person, right? But you make a soft H sound at the base of your throat like you would when you sigh, right? So first take a deep breath in through your nose. And just so you get the sound, I'll have you exhale through your mouth like, so that's the sound you're going to make. So inhale through your nose, but make that sound with your mouth closed. Do it again. Inhale through your nose. One more. And now try to make the sound as you breathe in. It's a little harder. Do it as you breathe out. 2 more breaths like that. Breathe in with that victory sound. They call it the ocean sound, the sound of the ocean or the wind in the breath. Exhale that sighing sound long and slow. And do it one more time, but this time make the H sound a little softer. Some people call it like the Darth Vader breath or the scuba diving sounding breath, right? So it's that ongoing sound, and the sound starts to make the breath get longer and slower. And it starts to do that amygdala response where you shift out of panic thinking and into calm presence. And the longer you do the breath, like sometimes it takes a minute. If you've been caught in fear, it takes a minute. So that's a little mini of the victory breath. But I want to actually thank all of you for the service that you're doing in the world, for being a change maker and believing in the good. And I guess I want to just end and say, make sure you're doing practices that keep your cup full, that keep your resiliency strong, whatever those are. And just to trust in your own integrity, to stand in equanimity as much as you can. Thank you all so much. And thank you, Habib and Independent Sector.